Hi, welcome back to Deep Images. If it's the first time watching, welcome to Deep Images. And we basically talk about film in a way that no other podcast dares to, pretty much. And so we have a topic going called Strange Love Stories. We're examining films that portray two beings in a love relationship that are either very strange people in and of themselves, or they're in a strange situation, or their situation is mentally unwell, or their situation is that it goes against a societal norm, like a taboo, like crossing taboos about age, race, getting with other species in some cases, um, incest,
Ooh.
everything, all the big taboos we're gonna hit. But the thing these movies have in common is, to us, the ones we're choosing, is they have a heart in them. And I'm using heart as the literal romantic symbol, because there's a genuine feeling of love or romance between these two beings. Sometimes it's one-sided, but there is that current, and we're emphasizing that because that's kind of overlooked, I mean, because we don't watch too many rom-coms around here. So this is our like answer to rom-coms. I'm gonna do one that it pretty much embodies everything I just said, including it's not a rom-com because some people thought it was a rom-com. Um, it's called Secretary from 2002 by Steven Shainberg. This is based on a short story by Mary Gaskell, and Shainberg drafted it along with this lady named Erin Cressida Wilson, and she wrote the final screenplay. So it's a female lead character. So most of the input on it is from a female point of view, male director though. The point of view is of this character Lee Holloway. So Lee Holloway is played by Maggie Gyllenhaal. This was kind of early in her career. uh, she's kind of quirky and unconventional looking, but still staggeringly beautiful at the same time. And in this movie, she is the epitome of someone who is she's mentally unwell, and she's closed in within herself, and she hurts herself. She's a cutter and a burner, and so it has borderline aspects. Uh, so we begin the movie, where else could we begin it? Her getting out of the mental hospital after an indeterminate amount of time, after apparently trying to kill herself. Her mom now is reactionary and overprotective. Her mom's played by Leslie Ann Warren, who I had not seen in a long time. She was good in Choose Me in the 80s. Um, and her father's played by Stephen McCaddy, who's one of my favorite actors. It was especially in Pontypool, but he plays a really thankless character in this movie. The guy's just kind of a dope and a loser, well-meaning, but he's so drunk and depressed, and I'm sure that malaise passed on into her, environment growing up. Um, so he's kind of detached from the story most of the time, really. Uh, but the mother's kind of like trying to keep an eye on Lee. When they do fight, Lee is tempted to begin hurting herself, and she has a little sewing kit with the little razors and everything. It's very elaborate. She's thought this thing out over years. Her bedroom is kind of like a 12-year-old girl's, and I don't know if she's grown up mentally yet. She's never had a job. Um, so this movie's plot is predicated on this character, this bizarre, sad character, getting a job and going further, into the world of romance. So she finds this leaflet with help wanted secretary. She just happens to have done typing in high school, and she did win an award. Uh, so this is her lucky day. She goes there, and this guy just wants a secretary, and it's his name's E. Edward Gray. He's played by James Spader, a very mercurial actor. And Gray is basically a control freak. He has one other woman that comes in and works in the office sometimes. Apparently, he's gone through a lot of secretaries, and they're really mad at him and hate him. So Lee Holloway is just trying to just do her thing and please him and just not worry about all that drama. And he kind of locks on to the fact that she's this kind of, let's get out of the way, the submissive personality. It's very interesting. The dynamic kind of ebbs and flows between them, and sometimes they're playing games that are funny with each other, head games, and then other times it gets a bit cruel, and it finally becomes elevated to a physical level, where he spanks her, and she's enjoying it, and then he stops and acts like it didn't happen.
Mhm.
So he feels this weird guilt when he actually physically hurts her, even though she wants him to. So
Mhm.
she's had so much pain that she's rerouting pain into pleasure, which is an amazing theme in all kinds of stories. And when you get deep into the neurological stuff here, and things that like imprint your consciousness all through your life and re-imprint it. So she is basically re-imprinting now. I mean, she's re-imprinting that. Okay, he beat me. Like I hurt myself, and I knew I was not gonna kill myself. He beat me, but I trust him. It's consensual. So there you have the groundwork of sadomasochism, you know, and that's why the movie was controversial in 2002. I honestly don't think this movie, A, would be made in 2024, funded by Hollywood, and B, if it was, it wouldn't be controversial at all. You know, all the teenagers would
Mhm.
go see it, and they've already seen it on TikTok. So, and they're doing it. They're doing it in their bedrooms. So, but this is a pre-totally jaded society at the turn of the millennium, and that you didn't see a movie with big actors that had some Hollywood funding. It was basically an independent movie, but of that stature, at that really wider release, that would have this as the theme and not demonize it, not like make it look like we're putting down S&M people, they're sick perverts, you know. That's what everyone's told when they're kids. I know I was, you know, and of course, I was also told that gay people were horrible for a long time when I was a kid. So, you know, it's just we are awakening slowly as a people, thankfully, too slowly. But in 2002, basically, this was what's nice about it is it's very subtle and it has absurd moments of humor. And just sometimes it's just first of all, the way it's shot is incredible. The colors are just popping all the time, and they're especially focused on the purple spectrum. So you go from deep purple to magenta to lavender to fuchsia, hot pink, and I'm probably missing a few.
Gorgeous.
And they're all there constantly. Like they start appearing in objects in his office, in decoration, and then as she becomes more confident because he tells her she needs to dress better because she's kind of what my mom would call frumpy, you know, and so she starts to dress better, and so those purplish tones start to pop up in her clothing, and the ultimate symbol of it is when he has a little um, garden, and I don't know what you would call it. I mean, his office is like a king's office. Not only does he have an office, he has a full kitchen. Not just like a little place to serve coffee. He has like a full kitchen in there. And I love the way this is shot. I mean, the corridors, it's like a labyrinth. And the one place he's been growing this flower. And the flower is just this blazing hot pink intershot with magenta lavender. And she catches him injecting something into it for it, I mean, to make it healthy. And they never really talk about that later, but they don't really need to. If to me, it was summing up. This is what this color means. This is what you know. It's something that you'll pick up on. I didn't pick up on it for many viewings, so but it really stood out to me the last time a lot because I looked at her expression and she was kind of like, why is he doing this? Why is he harvesting this beautiful flower in the middle of all this office and everything? What does this mean? You know, and it's all just part of his personality because he can't express it who he really is. He's all wound up. So finally, they get to the point where he makes her obey him, and she is willing, and he partially unclothes her, and she's kind of eager apparently, and he's like, "I'm not gonna fuck you." You know, her expression is just like he's just really matter of fact. But anyway, he does spank her a little. He masturbates and comes, and then he just
Oh my
immediately
God.
covers his composure. Like, okay, Lee, so I want you to get the Haldeman file for Tuesday, and I need you to bring me a copy.
Pretend like he didn't do
I mean, he's a little out of
it.
breath. I mean, but
Okay.
it's like somebody who's being caught masturbating right as you're
Oh
at
yeah.
climaxing, and so you're really trying to pretend like you didn't, and but your body can only do so much faking, you know.
Mhm.
um, Whereas she's like totally just devastated that he turned off after that, that he did do that. I guess she expected him to go into a romantic route or something since he's so wound up, and now he has an orgasm with her or on her or whatever, and but
Around her.
that's a trust moment. That's a big moment of trust. Putting yourself out there, and so instead, it goes the other direction. He starts to be really genuinely mean to her. He doesn't physically harm her, but he has a bit of an attitude, a bit of cruelty. He tests her, makes her do tasks that are ridiculous and repetitive, and sometimes physically difficult. He watches her the whole time. He's one of these guys. He watches everything. He's always watching her. And when you see him watching her, it's funny. I mean, I don't know where it's meant to be funny. I know a lot of people will be like, he's stalking her, but to me, it's funny because you see him in this unguarded moment where he's almost like this kid, like I want to open up this and like reach out to this woman. It's the way they cut it, the way he sneaks around, it's really kind of comical. So finally, she leaves the office. He fires her basically, and it's pretty devastating because she confronts him about their relationship or wanting to have one, and she tells him she loves him, and he's just like, leave. This can't happen. And I'm sorry I
Yeah.
let this happen. On the side, there's this extremely obnoxious guy named Peter who has had a crush on her since childhood, and their parents are trying to get them together to get married. And so, right in the middle of all this chaos, not knowing what to do, constantly, I mean, I'm not just saying this to be shocking, constantly masturbating and having dreams about mainly about Edward, but sometimes Peter will pop in and she'll like try to see if that turns her on and then he'll turn her off. And that is such a how the brain works when you're doing it. Yes, that's
That is
so
bizarre.
very realistic, very realistic. Like you're thinking of this one woman, and all of a sudden you think of this other woman, and you're like, which one would be more? Okay, I'll go back to this one. And that's kind of what she does. Literally, they depict it. And
That's fun.
because and when she thinks she might get off thinking of Peter, they're having sex on top of a washing machine because he hangs out at a laundromat. They never explain if he lives there, works there, hangs out there, but that's the only place you see them talking other than the parents' house. And after a while, it's kind of ridiculous because nobody comments on it. So we, the audience, are just like, I guess. And I think it's when you show her having sex with him on top of the washing machine, it's like, and then she shifts back to Edward. It's like this guy's nutty. This guy's not something I want to be involved in. This laundromat kid. I want to be involved with this massive as a sadist. And that's funny when you get the audience. You give the audience two men who are, by many people's standards, morally uh, questionable, and the woman is with both of them, and you end up cheering for the one you wouldn't think was questionable. And so that's kind of what she does here. What Lee does is she's got the safe kind of suburban nerd guy, and she's like, I'm just going to take a risk on this megalomaniac lawyer. And so she runs away from her wedding. It's not even really staged yet, but she had just put on some wedding dress, and she goes to his office and confronts him, and it gets intense. And so he decides to test her one last time, and he's like, "Put your hands on the desk, put your feet on the floor, and don't move until I get back. I command you." And she does. And you're thinking, oh, he'll go to get some coffee, or maybe he'll go home and run and get, and maybe he'll make her wait like 5 hours or something. But no, it's like 2 weeks or more go by. I think it's about around 10 days, I think is what
Uh,
I was thinking. Um, and the other woman who works in the office just is letting the media in and letting her parents in. And finally, they let Peter in, and Peter forcibly pulls her from the desk and knocks her
yes.
down. And like we were talking before, it's ironic that uh, the guy she doesn't want to be with, that everybody thinks is like, not a pervert, he's the only one who actually physically hurt her against her will. Whereas every time Edward did, she liked it. Sure enough, he's watching. Edward's watching that scene, and he has it's acting. He doesn't just say a word, but that he's like, she really has chosen me over that guy. He's finally out of the picture. Meanwhile, she's like peeing on the floor and all this horrible stuff.
Lord.
And
Yeah.
so, the only person who understands what she's doing, not about the S&M part, but the psychological, is her father. And that's the only scene where he has any resonance. Is he comes to her
Mhm.
and he asks her a few questions, she tells him a few basic things, and she's not going to leave. And he just tells her, it's okay. This is cool. If this is what you need to do, this is wonderful, Lee. And she's like, I love you, Daddy. And it's like, so like, another under discussed moment in this movie. I think it was kind of pivotal because right shortly after that, Edward comes in and, of course, rescues her. And he literally carries her out of the office into the car, gets home, carries her up the steps, carries her into the house, carries her into the tub, takes off all her clothes. Nothing at all is left to the imagination. But if I say it's tastefully done, I think someone would
Mhm.
agree or disagree with me. I think it was fine. And so, and he does bathe her, and they kiss, and it's kind of a little bit of dialogue, and then they do an upshot of her in that tub, totally naked, her whole body revealed, and this look on her face, and it looks like she feels like she's like floating in heaven, like it's like transcendental, you know, and because she's finally found someone who understands what pain and pleasure mean to her. And so they get married, and she narrates that they have a normal life, pretty much. Uh, Spoilers, big spoilers. So the most graphic scene in the movie, the most rough scene that would shock people, is at the very end. Not the very, very end, but she's talking about them and their honeymoon and stuff. And on their honeymoon, she sits in front of a tree, with jagged bark, with her back bare, chains her to it, and then he
Mhm.
attempts to have missionary position, a little uncomfortable for both of them, but they're really into it. And you see the bark is like hurting her. And I was like, whoa.
Mhm.
I take it to another level, but hey, but it's okay. They're married now. They're consensual.
It's creative.
Like, yeah, never going to be boring with him in the bedroom. And, so the
Mhm.
ending, Lee looks very satisfied. I'll throw in here real quick. There's been a theory that Lee, it's all in her head, like an American Psycho, and there is no Edward Gray, and they never get together. And so the look she has at the end means she's just basically still out of the mental hospital. And I don't believe that for one fucking minute. There's not enough evidence of that in the movie. There's too many shots where we read into him. Uh, to be that way. It would all have like it would have to be every shot from her point of view. Um,
Uh-huh.
and in American Psycho, I'm pretty sure every shot is from Bateman's point of view. I can't think of any scenes or diversions,
Yeah.
but that was changed from the book. As we know, in the book, he really was a
Mhm.
killer. In the movie,
Yeah.
he doesn't know what his reality is at the end, but the director said that he probably imagined all of it. And so but she's like trying to tell one kind of story with the characters from a book that's telling a different kind of story. And I think it's because if you read American Psycho, especially back then when it was infamous, it was not going to be filmed. I mean, it would have been filmed in Europe independently with a loan from Studio Canal. It would be beyond NC-17 X-rated, and it would be relentlessly depressing.
For
Now,
sure.
a lot of movies like that do come out in France, and some of them are pretty brilliant, but this is America, and it's American Psycho. So it's like, this ain't gonna, how can we do this in a movie in America? So they decided to put in that, it could be an imaginary thing and he's insane in a different way and all this stuff. And also she was lampooning the 80s, which by that time was the past. But anyway, enough about American Psycho. Secretary is incredible and I highly recommend it.
Mhm.
And do you have any thoughts on this, Rhiannon, since you also have seen this masterpiece?
Oh, I really enjoyed it, and you're making me want to watch it again. Like I said, I
Yay.
watched a lot of movies when I was younger, but now that I'm in a lovely, beautiful, peaceful place, I look forward to watching The Secretary again. What stood out to me was Maggie Gyllenhaal's performance, incredible, absolutely incredible. And I don't think I knew who James Spader was. I hadn't seen very many of his films at the time, but
Right,
now I've seen quite a few more, like Wolf or whatever with Jack
right,
Nicholson and
right.
James Spader. I love that movie.
Have you seen
So
Crash by
no,
Cronenberg?
I haven't seen that yet.
No,
No,
that
not yet.
movie kind of changed Spader's career. Spader's after that, Spader had some really good choices, and this is one of the first really big ones he did, like a few years after Crash, and I think it's some of his very best work. Um, so it's all good in the hood. Secretary, I recommend to everybody who's watching, and
Did James Spader? Did James Spader wasn't he in The Office as well?
I don't know. I don't
The
think so.
American
Well,
Office.
yeah, he was for one season he was because the
That
cast turnover. Yeah, he was. But he's also
he
in
was.
that
I
in
picked
that
him up.
show called like The Blacklist or something. And he's won. I'm pretty sure he's won at least one Emmy, but been nominated for quite a few. And he's lost all his hair now, so and he hasn't tried to really replace it, and he looks very different. But he's getting a lot of kudos in his late middle age as being a brilliant actor. So it was nice to see this early work from him. So we're gonna
All right, so
hand the floor to Mr. Butler.
thank you. So today's movie we're going to be discussing is Natural Born Killers from 1994, directed by the great Oliver Stone. Not Quentin Tarantino. It's a sometimes can be a slight misconception, but if you're like a cinephile, you obviously know this movie. You know who this movie actually belongs to. Like this is definitely
Right.
Stone's interpretation, especially considering to Tarantino's dismay on the film. Like he definitely like really hates this film, but his hatred to it, at least his notorious hatred to it, has kind of like died down these days.
Yeah.
He hasn't really made it public
Well, it wasn't
as much as he
realistic. It
did.
wasn't realistic because he sold two scripts with a similar plot, True Romance and Natural
Yeah,
Killers. He was not established in Hollywood. I mean, if everybody who was sold their scripts, then it got turned into something different, and then they got famous and went back and got mad. I mean, they have wars in Hollywood constantly. It'd be a nightmare. Uh, but
yeah,
for some reason, he felt like he was special, and after he hit, with his own movies he directed, then he's like, "Hey, I own From Dusk Till Dawn. I own Natural Born Killers. I own True Romance." And it's like, all right. In Natural Born Killers case, it deviates by far the most because all he had was a skeletal idea, which was similar to True Romance, but he didn't flesh it out
yeah.
like he did True Romance. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
True.
I just wanted to
Oh no,
explain.
you're fine. I actually do agree on that though, because like at the time, 1994. I can't remember if Pulp Fiction or Natural Born Killers was released first in that year. But at that time,
They're a
he
month
technically did
apart.
have a month apart.
Yeah, I do think Pulp
Okay, yeah.
Fiction came out in July, and I think National Born Killers came out in August. I read
Yeah, so
this
yeah,
last
at that
week, but I
time
might
he
be.
had like just Reservoir Dogs. So yeah, he didn't really have a filmography. It was just that one film.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mickey and Mallory, they're these notorious serial kill or mass murderers, I should say, um, that basically become publicized by the media. Um, and like I want to say the best word to describe this movie is chaotic. Like it truly is chaotic, and it's kind of hard to really it's kind of hard for me to express my true feelings for this movie in like a full essay, but I'm pretty sure I can definitely put it full front on this podcast because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
For one, Mickey and Mallory both grew up with very traumatic and abusive childhoods, and we see that in the very first opening scene, like the diner scene. It basically like completely like slaughter everyone in the diner except for like one person. Very effective and very weird scene. Like right off the bat, you're immediately thrown into the film's plot. Like they don't really waste a second. And then like throughout the first half of the film, it's literally just um you're literally just with the two main characters. Um, basically the what is it called? The protagonist villains,
hmm Yeah,
protagonist villains of
they're
the
like
film.
the evil protagonists. That's what Bill calls them sometimes. I mean, more or less, but they might not be evil.
Yeah,
Depends on their mileage.
Yeah, I don't really see them as I wouldn't say they're definitely evil. They're most of the time they're definitely misunderstood though. I would say that they're misunderstood baddies. Um,
When we
let's
get
see
to
if
the
if
Indian
we
scene,
go further into
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
oh sorry. So if we want to go further into like their childhood, like Mallory was raped by her father and terrible, terrible guy. And she ends up killing him from my memory.
Well, yeah, she kills
Yeah,
him
she ends
with
up
Mickey's
killing
help.
him.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, with Mickey's help. Fucking douchebag. But
played by
the
Rodney
interesting about
Dangerfield.
yeah, great performance by the way. Interesting thing about the first half of the movie compared to the second half is that really a lot of the victims in the first half practically deserved what they had got. A lot of them were assholes.
Most of them,
Mm.
maybe two-thirds of
Yeah,
them,
I
but a lot
definitely
didn't.
saw it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bicyclist didn't
And
deserve it, and the pharmacy guy didn't deserve it. No, he was kind of a douche.
right,
Go ahead.
I do think
They kind of
that the
got.
movie.
Did they get used to killing? Did they just get used to killing? Is that what? Like they've killed so many people, they're
Uh,
just getting used to it.
Yeah, it's like
right.
nothing,
Yeah,
you know.
it's a way of life for them.
It's like second
Yeah.
nature.
And let's see, what was I gonna go by? So the film practically makes you go through like a lot of emotions. It's one of those what the fuck am I watching? I don't know what I'm watching, but I really love like every single minute of it. It's a very unique experience. Like the
There's a lot
chemistry
of
between
energy.
both Mickey and Mallory is yeah, a lot of energy. It's toxic, it's charming. Like they literally both get like self-married over a bridge and they cut their palms open and expose each other's bloods together.
A
It's
blood
very
pact.
twisted. It is really twisted,
And the
yeah.
blood
And,
becomes an animated sequence.
mhm,
Can you
a
talk
very
when you talk? Can you talk at some point about the cinematic techniques of this film? Because that's really, I think, what makes it rises it to a level beyond criticism.
oh yes. I will say that the visuals honestly add to the narrative of the film, especially for an early, almost mid 90s movie. Um, very, very heavy narrative. And let's see, the topics surrounding the film also became heavily controversial among the film's release, like the glorification of violence. At the time, many people weren't really rocking with it, both critics and audiences alike. But as decades came by, the film has definitely gained a much bigger cult status.
Hmm.
Um, and me and you talked about this actually, Henry, that the film doesn't really fully glorify violence; it more mocks it in a metaphorical way.
Yeah,
It tries to be like meta about it,
it's a very meta movie.
and yeah, it is a very meta movie. It fits in the vein with a lot of '90s movies, especially crime films. All right, yeah. So first half is basically just their shenanigans. There's a lot of bloodshed. Second half, you basically get to see they're they're in prison practically, and then they practically get publicized by the media. There's this detective Jack Scagnetti who is practically obsessed with the mass murderers. He has like almost sexual viewpoints to Mallory,
Hmm.
and he's extremely obsessed with Mickey especially, and he
Hmm.
was a psychopathic murderer who killed prostitutes in the past.
Well, no, he only killed one. See, he
Oh yeah,
killed.
he did kill one.
Yeah, he killed that one. See, he was a true crime writer, and he got really
Mm,
famous. And so when he started talking about them with the media, they ate it up, and he was obsessed with
yeah,
Mickey and Mallory. So he finally buys a prostitute, and it was a pretty horrible scene, really. It was
it
pretty
was.
sadistic.
Yeah.
The
Uh-huh.
way he choked her out, it was like, and then he says he's coming to get Mickey.
Yeah.
So in other words, now he feels like I've killed someone, so I'm empowered now, like you. So
Mhm. I want to say a really bizarre segment in the film is right after right after they realize that they're practically stranded in the desert after getting obliterated off of shrooms, mushrooms, and they head down to a ranch where this guy, Warren, he provides them with like food and shelter and stuff like that. And when they're both asleep, he practically sees like this demon within Mickey and attempts to
Yeah.
like exorcise it like out of him or something. Yeah.
He's like a shaman. Russell Means plays that guy. You know, he was a Native American activist in the 70s. Then he started kind of acting here and there, you know, when they needed a Native American in the 90s. And yeah, he doesn't say any of his lines in English either. He says it in what I forgot the tribe language and they subtitle it, but he's talking to his nephew who
Yeah.
does know English too and or his grandson, I don't know, little kid. And
Hmm.
yeah, he says you can see the demon. And you or mentioned earlier we were talking about evil, and
Yeah.
there's a few things that Oliver Stone pointed out on the commentary of the film is that, for instance, when they're walking up the hill, getting there, all of the um, all of the sheep start to freak out, and the ones with
Yes.
horns start to try to attack them, and that's because
Yeah.
it says animals they sense this evil. They either attack it or they run away from it, which humans
I
just
actually really love that. I think it's like a really nice, almost biblical metaphor.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
I really
so
loved
I
it. It was
think
a
he
nice.
did you think he exercised them? That's a good point. I haven't heard anyone use that term for it in years. So it's making
Yeah.
me think about that again. I mean, obviously he thought he exercised them, but something bad happened. But you go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. And then around the scene after that, they end up in a field filled with rattlesnakes, which it even becomes more bizarre. If you haven't seen the movie, you definitely have to know. You have to definitely watch it to like put these pieces together. But they both come across a whole field of rattlesnakes, and they both get bitten.
But
They go to this small shop to like get some anti venom, which is sold out. And
well,
then
I need to
when
rewind
one
you a
of
minute though. The linchpin event that goes into the snakes and the pharmacy is that the Indian who helped them, Mickey accidentally killed him because he was high.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then thereafter, animals are trying to get him. Snake spot. But you go ahead from there.
right. So they get bitten by the snakes, and then they go to this small store to try to retrieve some anti venom. Yeah, so on the pharmacy, once one of the pharmacists notices the both of them, that's when shit starts to hit the fan. Basically, Mickey kills him, and then there's a feud with the police, and they eventually get arrested. And that's when it transitions to the prison segments, like which take place a year later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's a slower tone. You know, that
it
first
is.
half is
Yeah,
so frantic and energetic, and then it kind of slows down. You know, and you get more in deeper into the characters.
yeah, it is definitely a slower tone, but it is still intriguing. Like you see, both of the killers being thrown through these many interviews, and you see the media heavily publicizing them as like heroes, even.
Mm-hmm.
Scagnati still falling in his obsession with the two mass murderers. Um, and then even going to like the ending where they escape the prison and Mickey, Mallory, Gail, and
Owen.
who's the other? Owen, yeah. Mickey, Mallory, Gail, and Owen, they escape into the woods. Um, and I mean, I love this scene. I really love this scene. So, um, Gail pleads for his life, and Mickey and Mallory basically deny it. Basically, they basically deny his free will to live, and they tell him that the only witness that they will have is the camera.
Yeah, not him.
Mhm.
Hmm.
The
The
camera.
camera will tell the story. The camera will tell the story.
Hmm. Well,
I think it's
back up a
very
little bit
poetic.
because you got to the media part and then you rushed to the end. But who is Wayne Gale for anyone who hasn't seen this movie? Because he is the embodiment of all this media stuff, and he is a character. Like,
So Wayne Gale is basically, I want to say he's probably above. I want to say he's above. What's his name? Scagnetti, as being the major antagonist of the story.
yes, I agree with that.
So, so yeah, Wayne is played by Robert Downey Jr. If any of you guys aren't familiar with the name Iron Man, like current Iron Man in the MCU, definitely check that out. And he's basically he sensationalizes like real life crimes and violence for like entertainment, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, and that was when that was starting to peak in the 90s. And of course, since then, it's just,
Yeah,
I mean, it's taken over the world, it seems like.
yeah, yeah, and he's practically like a symbol of the way that the mass media and crime reinforce each other.
Hmm. Hmm.
To catch a predator.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's backfired a few times on some people. They had a whole show
Mhm.
about that and it went wrong and the whole show folded. I mean, it was
Mhm.
bad. Um, I watch too many true crime videos. I'll admit I'm kind of addicted. But
I've watched some myself, especially Investigation
We're
Discovery.
fascinated. I think humans are
Mhm.
fascinated by the
yes,
shadow of humanity.
absolutely. And have you noticed, so in retrospective, since 1994, and Oliver Stone is criticizing this when we're in the era of hosts like Robert Downey Jr. I mean, I'm not the actor, I'm sorry. Morton Downey Jr. was a host. They're not related. And Geraldo Rivera, and those two are basically who Wayne Gale's patterned after they just made him Australian. But those guys were big,
Mhm.
Sally Jesse Raphael and all these people, and down to Jerry Springer, and then exploded. I mean, it's like they foresaw that it was just going to consume people's lives, because the internet was only nascent then. So, wow.
Yeah.
Mhm. It was a foreshadowing.
I did
Yeah, it's
I did
prophetic.
wanna I did wanna ask I did have a question for both of you guys
Sure.
regarding the two antagonists. Who do you think is more intimidating, like Scagnetti or Gale?
Well, actually, there's three antagonists because they've got the sleazy warden played by Tommy Lee Jones.
True.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
he's the worst as far as just being disgusting. Um,
Yeah, he's pretty
Gagnetti is
gross.
much more evil than Wayne Gale
Mm.
because Wayne Gale does try to have a moral compass when the breakout happens. He goes all over the map. you he's a weird character, but I don't think he's evil. He's extremely manipulative to get what he wants.
Mm.
Whereas Gagnetti, I just think he's a psycho.
Mm.
It's been a while since I've seen this movie, and I just remember the energy of the movie and the
Hmm.
colors and just
Yeah.
how vibrant the movie is. It's just a really vibrant film, and the connection between the romance, just
Absolutely.
on like electrical, fiery,
And the
fiery
music,
romance.
yeah, the music adds a lot to the movie. Um,
Mhm.
the producer James Hampshire picked out most of the music by hand and run it by uh, Oliver Stone to work it with the editor. Um, we talked about this the other day, Elijah, but a lot of people probably know this. But this is like Jane Hampshire said, this is the most expensive art film ever made. And he deliberately made
Yes.
every department. Robert Richardson, a cinematographer, you said you're a big fan of, his editors, and Jane Hampshire, the producer, who was in charge of the music. Basically, he wanted the images. He knew what he wanted, but he let each of them experiment along the way, and therefore the sounds like overlap. The movie's filled with subliminals. So back in the days of
Mhm.
VHS, if you put it frame by frame, there's all kinds of crazy stuff in there. I haven't done that on Blu-ray yet though, but yeah, it cinematically it's really uh It's incredible. I don't know how to describe it. I think cinematically it's the best American film of the 90s. It's just that's just me being
Oh, really? That
hyperbolic.
high?
I really, yeah, I mean, because I think it embodies the 90s and it does it in a way that is cinema. It's like pure cinema. You just go
Yeah.
along this ride. You don't worry every second about what the plot's going this way and plot's going that way. They're just pulling you around, you
You're
know?
going with it.
Yeah, just on for the ride.
Yeah, man.
So I definitely do want to point out that if you haven't seen Natural Born Killers, especially if you're a cinephile, it's a must watch. Um, a lot of great narratives and definitely social commentary elements surrounding this film. It's a weird film, and it's definitely not for everyone, but I do think it's one that everyone needs to see. It's littered with all-star performances. Oliver Stone really absolutely crushed it with his directing. And I really wish we could see like more of these types of films from him these days.
Yeah, he kind of lost his way. I mean, not as a person, but
Yeah.
as a
What is he
director.
up to actually? What is he up to these days?
I mean, he makes these movies that I don't know. Where every once in a while he'll make a movie, and it's usually another kind of fictionalized biography of some popular subject, and he gives his spin on it. But I haven't been entertained by them. But he was on quite a roll in in the 90s when he went all avant-garde. Like it started with
Uh-huh.
JFK. Well, it started with the Doors. The Doors
Yeah.
with JFK, you got more so the National Born Killers, and then Nixon. Believe it or not, Nixon is extremely wild. Have you seen it? I
I
mean, I don't
haven't.
like
No.
Richard Nixon, but that's part of the whole thing is they get Anthony Hopkins to play Richard Nixon, and
Oh, cool.
it's so unusual, but it's just it's like a sequel to JFK. It's like it goes into all of the conspiracy theories, and it's how Nixon reacted to the same power structure that killed Kennedy. And then after that, he did a film noir called neo noir called U Turn, with Sean Penn. It had a very young Jennifer Lopez in a real kind of femme fatale role, and it was kind of
Yeah.
sleazy. It was good. I mean, visually, again, it was visually amazing. But since then, I haven't responded too much to his work. But and then his earlier work, Talk Radio, also is a brilliant movie that commented on the shock jock and the media then. That was like 1989, and it was based loosely on a true story about a guy who talked shit, kind of more like a Howard Stern than a Rush Limbaugh. He wasn't right wing. He was kind of left wing, but really angry and pissed everybody off, basically. And Eric Bogosian had done the play on stage, and Oliver Stone just directed it with a small budget, like on purpose, like
Mhm.
mostly in the radio station. And as in the real life incident, it was based on when he leaves the radio station, he is murdered by one of his redneck enemies who calls him a lot. And that's what happened in real life to
Mhm.
this guy. And so again, that stuff escalated, and then from that movie to National Born Killers is almost like a through line of how the media is just like taking over, and people can't distinguish fiction from reality anymore. I mean,
Yeah, those last few words definitely very important and crucial to the media. I do totally agree like that people can't always distinguish fiction from reality.
that's why we've had so many of these controversies about films because
Yeah.
people they bring their morality to art. They bring their personal morality and trauma to art. And
Uh-huh.
rather than letting the art inform them, they judge the art based off those feelings, which is their
True.
right to do. But then they start telling other people this is the correct interpretation and this should be banned or burned or, because it triggers me this way. Whereas I'm like,
I do think I'm sorry, I
I said,
interrupted
no,
you.
go
I
ahead.
feel like I do think that a part of cinema playing with like people's minds and um, making it sometimes difficult to just like distinguish fiction from reality. I do think that earlier exploitation films could have played a huge part in this, like late '60s and the '70s films especially. And I
I
hope
think
this
they
is a
were
topic
commenting. Yeah,
Yeah, I hope this is a topic we can do on the show sometime.
well, we've covered a few. We periodically cover exploitation films from the 60s, 70s because we're all fans of at least a few of them, no matter what country.
Yeah,
And those films are a mirror of their time. You know, that was a time of chaos and revolution and new permissiveness to the West, and um, the films and those characters reflected it. I mean, I love getting to that again. That go deep about the subject. Get these peel these layers back, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I wanted to add to what you're saying, Henry, there
yeah,
about, the art and being kind of, people people's trauma stopping people from creating certain characters and different narratives or whatever that trigger people. Well, I think that art is meant to trigger people. I think that's a huge part of art is actually job is to trigger people,
well
and
said.
perhaps that's kind of why people they have kind of pared back or softened or taken the edge off their art these days. It's because
Mm,
they're letting their audience dictate their character writing and the scripts that they're actually putting forth. So the only scripts that are being put forth to people are those that the audience will like. So
right.
therefore, that's how they get the money. And then because that's how they get the money, that's what dictates how amazing, how impactful a piece can be.
Hmm.
Because I mean, if everything is vanilla, you're not going to get any kind of natural born killers vibes
Right.
right,
out there. Like you're not going to get a movie like that happening
It to
with
me, it's
the
like,
right.
acting.
do you guys are you guys familiar with an Ouroboros, the serpent that eats its own tail? It's a mystical symbol. It's in most
Mm-hmm.
religions and mythology. So that's what this is. Like you're right. The audience has gotten all super sensitive, so they're pandering. But on the other hand, those corporations are dictating the narratives that come out in the media because the same corporations that own Hollywood own the media. So they're telling us what to think, and we're having a hard time as a people responding in a in a critical thinking way. I mean, not individually, but as a culture, I think there's a crisis going on in the West. Like, and with the arts, it's like this is the time when the arts needs to be energized again, like the '60s, because we're seeing the largest mass scale protests in America, well, ever. Some of them have exceeded the '60s now. I saw them in
I
Charlotte. I
agree.
never thought I'd see it in Charlotte. I was tripping out. There was a Palestinian flag. There were, I'd say, about 500 people, and I was like, "Wow." Well, maybe like two or 300 people, but it was like in front of a church. I don't know what, but it was like so incredible, just the energy that people would dare to do that because that's not a popular stance in the state to have. Because this state is very pro-Trump overall and pro-Biden, and then they're both against Palestine. So if you come out and protest those things in a city like this, I think that takes a lot of bravery. But yeah, Art as a Mirror is brilliant. I really think that Natural Born Killers is one of the key American films that manages to do that. I mean, that's like a zeitgeist of its time.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that Taxi Driver is a similar kind of movie. I feel like it summed up the idealism of the '60s that went astray after Vietnam and became nihilism. And so this guy comes back to America and he blames all the wrong people for his problems. And look at what we're going through now. I mean, with the migrant crisis, nothing's changed. You still have these people
right,
who get up and mouth off, and they blame the migrants for everything, and they don't blame the
right.
government that like,
In Ireland too.
yeah,
Yeah, in
except Claire
Ireland too, it's
Daly.
happening.
I miss Claire
Yeah.
Daly. Okay, so do you have any concluding thoughts on Natural Born Killers? Either of you nice folks, because I'm sure I've talked too much about it. It's Elijah's movie.
It's a really great movie. I highly recommend it for anyone who has not seen it. I definitely do think that all cinephiles should see it at least once. And because there's a lot of like things you can take away from it, as zany and loony as it is, It's definitely one of Oliver Stone's most ambitious films, and I mean that in a really good way.
Oh yeah. So I like your conclusions. Do you have any other thoughts, Rhiannon? I was excited by your input.
Oh, I just love the film. I love the film. I'm going to definitely watch it now again, Elijah. I'm excited about watching it again. I think I've seen it about 3 or 4 times, but my life was very wild and chaotic, and it was mirroring the energy of the film. So
Mm.
now that my life is peaceful, I can actually watch it now and probably take in more of the elements and
Yeah,
take a deeper look.
the 90s were a time of angst, and a lot of people were feeling it, and they related to
Agreed.
that movie. This is a great topic. So we're going to wrap up for this episode, and then we are going to return with more strange love stories from Deep Images, and we just want to impart to you guys the need to just drop a like on the video. It'll help us so much. And if you would subscribe to the channel, it would really help. And
Yeah.
you'll get our content as soon as we post it, and you'll help us out, and we'll try to do the best job we can to share our very off the beaten path views on cinema. So have a good night.
Like,
Bye.
comment, subscribe.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.